Good evening and welcome to the March 4th Human Services Committee meeting. We have a quorum. Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We have citizen comment, and we will have 3 minutes from each speaker. We're going to start with Karen Courtwright, speaking on HH6. Welcome, Karen.
Hi. I got to see the documentary, The Notorious RBG lately, and I just loved the way everybody starts at the Supreme Court. Honorable Chief Justice, and may it please the court. So, Honorable Chairwoman, and may it please the committee. Thanks for letting me speak tonight. I just have a couple things I wanted to mention. Seeing the conversation on the agenda tonight about recommendations made by the committee that I was on, and more members of the committee wanted to be here, and a couple will come late. But anyway, so first of all, members of our committee have had some follow-up conversations with Chief Cook, and we're looking forward to continuing our discussions both with you and your committee as well as the chief. Well, it's clear that the city's current financial condition can't support all the recommendations that committee made. There are a few things that appear to be available at no cost, and Chief Cook's already indicated some intentions in these areas. So here are the recommendations that can be done at virtually no cost. One, allow for the intake of citizen complaints at locations other than the police station. Allow for citizen complaints to be received by senior leadership at EPD above that first level supervisor where it generally happens now, and potentially by non-EPD staff. And another request that I just want to underline is our request to you and the City Council to create a charter for a new civilian review board based on the detailed recommendations in our report, which we gave you in, I don't know, it's December or January. So we'd love to, continue our discussions about how alternative dispute resolution might be utilized on a voluntary basis with respect to citizen complaints, recognizing that it's not a replacement for investigation. It's not something that can be mandated to police officers or anything like that. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Next, we have Ms. Doreen Price, HH4 and HH7. Welcome, Doreen.
Hi, thank you very much. Nothing like nature telling us that climate change isn't going to go away. In terms of HH4, the rebuilding warehouse, it's been suggested before, and I'm just continuing the discussion to keep it in memory, that the rebuilding warehouse is obviously a really, really essential place for jobs. And I'm thinking about future jobs related to CARP, because we know there's going to be houses that are damaged and people who can't afford the repair, or insurance companies refusing to upgrade to something that's going to prevent damage in the future. So there's a real opportunity there. And also to assess what's been done so far in terms of triaging the circumstances on February 1st where everything was kind of overwhelmed. And then, so that the Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse could do both deconstruction and construction, and maybe at the place that's 222 Oakton, because we haven't gotten an update yet with regard to the climbing wall center. And then with regard to the climate action, it's kind of, it really parallels and synergizes with what I previously said, that they can be a center and opportunity of people living in the community, because we'll have affordable housing possibly for these people, and that having workers who live in the community are accessible when you need to deploy in an emergency. They're happy. the people are happy, and the people who can't afford somebody will be able to afford somebody, because you're talking about people that the city might be able to subsidize to help these workers have a fair wage, and also help the people who are trying to live in a situation that's difficult for them. And that's it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doreen. Next, we have Corinne Clarkson, HH10. Welcome, Corinne.
Hi, Corinne.
Corinne,
Yes.
apologies.
Oh, it's a lifelong. I have a handout. Oh, okay. Good evening. My name is Corinne Clarkson. I live on West Central Street in Evanston, and I have 2 border collies, Miss Billy and Bob. First off, I want to state that we are aware that Lincoln Street Beach is owned by the state. We know that it hasn't been deeded or anything to Evanston yet, hopefully. Hopefully it will. So I'm here tonight to represent the many, many Evanstonians that have in the past and would in the future make use of a proper dog beach. So I speak for them too. Previously, the dog beach has been a profit center for Evanston. That was before the lake water level started to rise. As it shrunk, we continued to use it, and last year we even continued to use it as much as possible. As we made best use of it. I've handed out an article from yesterday's Tribune. The article goes into some detail about the sinking of Chicago and the lake level rising. I ask that you read it. We haven't had a dog beach, I think it's for 3, possibly 4 years now, because of lake level. And this article points out that it's not going to, the likelihood of the dog beach water receding is almost nil. So it appears that there will be no dog beach this year again. Dogs have become important members of many families. All you need to do is walk around the block and you will likely see as many as 10 dogs being walked. Dogs need exercise and mental stimulation. That mental stimulation also provides human stimulation. And we would take them to the dog beach for that. The dog beach also enables other owners to socialize. We get to know each other, and many times end up socializing outside of the dog beach. So again, we urge the city of Evanston to declare Lincoln Street Beach a dog beach. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final comment is actually a presentation. We have Miss Bree Noel got in touch with me, and she is concerned about homelessness in Evanston, and she had a fundraiser this weekend called the Bow Party, where she made hair bows and sold them, and she raised some money. She's coming today to present us with a check. I asked that she came to present me with a check. As we all know, I can't take a check. So I asked that she make it to Evanston Own It. Bree, would you like to come up and share your check? Go by yourself? Sure. Do you want to tell us, do you want to have a couple of comments about? Here, that's fine. You want to tell us about it? Tell us about your party?
was like about a fundraiser for homeless people and to raise money for them, and I raised $100.
Thank you, Bree. Colleagues, will you all come take a picture with Bree, please? Sure. Thank you.
Good job, Bree. Did you get nervous? You got nervous? You did? Okay.
Mom, you want to give me a picture? That's great, thank you. Yes, thank you. Did you take pictures at your party? Will you share those pictures with us?
Oh, yeah. Here, stand here. We're going to take a picture. Make sure it's not in front of your face. Okay, there you go. Okay, we got to even it out.
Ready? Oh, I like that smile. Cute.
And thank you to Mother Renee, who serves on the Homelessness and Housing Commission as well. Thank you for raising fine children. It's all in the thought. That's so kind. Yes.
Is it possible you could send us pictures of the party when you were making the vote? We'd love to see them and put them on the city's website.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. We have one more? Oh, we have an email I'm going to read. This is to the Human Services Committee regarding the dog beach as well. This is from Karen Perlia. To all the Human Services Committee members, my name is Karen Perlia, and I'm a lifetime Evanston resident. I've lived in the 8th Ward for 25 years. Along with my husband, Louise, we run an Evanston Dog Beach Facebook page. We like to keep people informed and share pictures of the dog beach and other dog issues. Please consider, when hearing about the update on the dog beach, that there are many of us who want a dog beach this summer. If not in the current location, north of the boat dock, then please consider Lincoln Street Beach. Lincoln Street Beach is Evanston's own beach property that was not utilized as much by beach patrons last year. I believe strongly that by making Lincoln Street Beach the new dog beach location, it would be welcomed and used! I remind you all that the dog beach is very lucrative for the city of Evanston. It can bring in $40,000 or more. I am wanting to sit through a 3-hour committee. I am not wanting to sit through a 3-hour committee meeting or rally the troops until I know where the city of Evanston stands on this matter. But I assure you that there are many of us in Evanston and nearby suburbs that would like a dog beach to go in Evanston. So I urge those on this committee to consider this seriously. Sincerely, Karen Perlia. And we'll add this to the minutes. Thank you. Oh, thank you. All right, and that concludes citizen comment.
Actually, can I sign up for citizen comments?
Yes.
I spent a half an hour in the wrong room because I was going to speak after Karen.
Okay, your name? Come.
Hi.
Come. Your name is?
Hi. I'm Kathleen Engman, and my family and I live at 1213 Mulford.
Okay, and you're speaking on the dog beach as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
I don't have 3 minutes worth. I do, but I'll keep it short.
Okay.
I actually got a phone call this morning from a longtime Evanston advocate for the dog beach and many other fine things that keep people like us, this is almost 40 years for me, here. Barbara Janes. She's in warmer climes at the moment, but she's the one that reminded me that the dog beach would be discussed tonight, or at least nodded at. I've been in Evanston since 1985, and for all those years, I've been a dog owner. I think it's important to go on record that the dog beach, wherever it is, whether and when the city and its largest non-taxpayer and the state determine what might happen to Lincoln Street Beach, or whenever the city might decide what is the real number, because data drives everything. How much money does the city make when it sells dog beach tokens to Evanston residents and neighboring dog owners? Because, High Lake maybe is a little dredging, but it's important to provide this service at cost, whatever it takes, to the residents who represent a cross-section of Evanstonians and to our neighbors. I have a very long list of folks out from that money-making Skokie Dog Park who will be happy to know when you're prepared to entertain their testimony. I'm talking about dozens of people who have made use and wondered what the heck happened in Evanston, have made use of the dog beach and would so in the future. Are there questions?
We don't have an exchange here. Thank you for your
Okay.
comments.
Is the Mr. Hemingway
He's
that
going to have
Barbara
an
told me
update.
about?
Yep,
Is he here?
He is here, and he is going to have an update and when we get into our items for discussion. So you can stay and
Oh,
wait for
I
that.
can stay for that?
Yep.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it, Ms. Simmons.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And that concludes citizen comment? Yes. So we have items for consideration. We have HH1. Staff recommends approval of 2019 special events proposed in city parks contingent upon compliance of all requirements as set forth by the special event policy and guidelines. This year's calendar includes one new park event, 1 million steps for OCD walk. This is for action.
Second. Or move approval, I guess.
Alderman Fisk?
Mr. Hemingway? Could you just tell us a little bit more about the new event on the lakefront, the OCD event?
Sure. Sorry. Let me pull it
And
up.
I'm assuming that 100% of the money raised goes directly to OCD. I see that they are the sponsoring organization.
That is correct, Alderman. I'm sorry. Let me pull up my document here. The LCD event is they're new. The organizers, they came to us just as all special event planners do to advocate on their cause, and this is specifically the case of OCD. They're asking for approval of this event so that they could raise money. So what they do is they don't charge their participants. The participants go out and raise pledges. And if they raise a minimum of $25, they're able to get a T-shirt from the organizers. But the rest of it, if not, they just turn their pledges in. And so it is really based on the individual's efforts to support the organization. Again, they charge no fees, and they are willing to pay all our costs to have the event here in this community.
But 100% of what they raise goes to the OCD organization?
That is correct,
Okay.
outside of the cost from the city support.
No, I understand.
Correct.
Thank you. Mhm.
Alderman Fleming?
I just have a question in general about the policy. Can you tell me what we do if ever we send the bill out to the agency for reimbursement of personnel costs and it's not paid? And then also the refuge and reuse. I know I live near James Park and sometimes in the summer, and I realize some events don't have a permit, but I sometimes walk on Monday mornings and I go over and the trash cans are spilling over from what I assume are, maybe smaller birthday parties or such. So in the refuge and recycling, kind of what's our policy there if we find that there is extra trash left behind? And are we asking people also to get compost containers now that we have that citywide? And then my third question is about music. So again, I live near James Park where we have large festivals. And every now and again I get a call the next day of people complaining about the music volume. And so how is that handled?
Okay, I'm gonna try to get to all of them. First question, Alderman Fleming, I think you asked about what happens when someone don't pay. Our department tends to work with that organization, and we don't approve or bring back the following year their next year's event. There's not many, but there are a few where that happens. So we work through a deal to try to communicate the outstanding balance, and those to this point have paid. And if they didn't, we wouldn't bring it before you for approval. Refuse. So each organizer has an option to request additional cans to support their event. Sometimes the Special Events Committee actually tells organizers, based upon the number of people, that they need to get more trash cans. And so there is a fee. You pay $100, you get 10 additional cans. And then if you need more than 10, you pay $50 for every additional 10. Some events, that's listed right on the special event application. Those cans do come as trash and as recycled cans. You get 5 and 5 because we do try to promote recycling. But you know, we look at the number of participants that they anticipate for the event, and the committee will generally recommend you need more than the cans in that particular location. And we haven't run into a problem where any organizer have felt like that was an issue.
And are you trying compost? Have you offered compost?
So we have not gotten into composting from the committee's perspective. I think that's something we need to talk about and try to work with these events on doing, but we have not done that up to this point. So again, on the special event committee, on the application, there is a loudspeaker permit that's allowed. There's a fee that the organizer pay, depending on wherever the location is of the event. We do speak to times in which music is allowed. We have the organizer, and we tell the organizers, to try to direct speakers away from homes and toward the center of parks. If it's on the lakefront, turn your speakers toward the lake versus toward the homes. So just, that's how we try to articulate to the organizers about the use. But we do allow them to play music during our peak season up to 10 p.m.
Thank you, Alderman Fisk.
What happened to Polar Plunge? I don't see Polar Plunge on the list.
They moved back to Northwestern.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. HH2, the Parks, Recreation, Community Services Board recommend adoption of Resolution 15R19, naming the portion of Church Street between Hartree Avenue and Gray Avenue with the honorary street name sign Tina Lifford. This is for action, and I'll speak to it. So this is a street naming that would be in the 5th Ward. And Tina Lifford is a native of the 5th Ward. She still has family that's here. She has since moved. Her career has taken her to Hollywood. She's the current star of Queen Sugar, as well as have had roles on Scandal and dozens of other shows. She is the author of best-selling book, Little Book of Big Lies, and she gives back. She is still very much connected to the community. I don't know if I mentioned that she attended foster school, and she is a proud product of our community. Just by nature of her success and her philanthropy, she gives back by inspiring many residents in seeing what is possible in a career path, and also just her successes coming out of foster school. This is for action. Is there any further discussion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. HH3, staff recommends approval of Resolution 16R19, authorizing the city manager to enter into agreement for a 24-month lease term with Avengers Music Group, LLC. This is for action.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion?
No, I'll just say good work. I remember this was part of the budget discussion, and you said, give us some time, we'll find someone. So good work in finding somebody.
Thank you. And we found a great Evanston native that is experienced in the music industry, experienced music producer, working in various genres, having had a studio downtown Evanston, and really proud that he has committed to bringing his talents to the Fifth Ward. So thank you, Mr. Watson. Would you like to share anything? You're okay? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm abstaining. Motion passes. HH4, the Minority Women in Evanston-based Enterprise, MWEBE Development Committee recommends approval of the proposed pathways to union apprenticeship program with Evanston Rebuilder Warehouse and Minority Business Consortium. It is recommended Human Services Committee approve allocation of $40,000 during 2019, which will provide strong pathway for 6 Evanston residents to access apprenticeship programs. This is for action. Second. Any discussion?
Can I just make another quick statement? I don't have a
Please,
discussion,
yeah.
but so when we had our discussion on Saturday about equity, I just want to point out to members of the council that this is being done as part of MWEBE, which is great, and we know why that program exists, but this kind of thing is something that shows equity, right? So if we make all of our decisions thinking in terms of how can we support those who historically, don't get contracts with the city and so on and so forth, that this kind of thing would just be natural, right? We wouldn't have to do this in a special committee with special funding, with highlighted attention. We could have highlighted attention throughout everything we do. So I very much support this, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up as we're thinking of how government can either bring equity forward, particularly for our African American community, or how we can create barriers. So this is just an example of if we kind of have this thinking through everything, every decision we make, it doesn't have to just come out of MWEBE. It can be everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Fleming, for the support. And as a current chair of MWEBE, I'm really proud and grateful for Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse to come to us with this proposal. It's in line with all of our current discussions for workforce development and empowering and equipping our workforce. In addition to the 6 paid training, would you please come up and tell us about the additional up to 30 residents that can get free access to essential certifications that will make them more employable in the construction trades?
Certainly. And just to clarify, we actually have it as 10 workers that will be trained with the $40,000.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the 30 workers, what we are doing is offering up.
1 second. Would you please introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah, I apologize.
Thank you.
Ann Nicklin. I'm the Director of Workforce Training and Deconstruction Services at the Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse. I'm standing in today for our Executive Director, Ina Gutierrez, who could not be here. For the OSHA training and for the other professional certifications that we're exploring, basically what we're going to do is train up our staff and make use of existing minority and women owned or minority and women trainers within the Evanston city so that they are City of Evanston residents, and open up those classes to the public so that we can provide and support the increased kind of certification and credentialing of the Evanston workforce so that we can do OSHA 10. We're also looking at HAZWOPER and at lead RRP so that we can actually spread that certification and use the Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse kind of as a source of generating increased certifications throughout the city.
Thank you. So don't leave yet. This is important because on MWBE, where we are managing compliance for our local goals, our minority and women goals, this is helping us to assure the contractors that the talent is here, and you're helping us do that. I do have one more thing I need some feedback on. So one condition of my support was a sub-agreement with MBC. And I don't know that I have the exact details, but can you tell us how you'll be working together with the Minority Business Consortium?
Certainly. So we'll be working with the Evanston Minority Business Consortium on two really key parts. So we're going to work with them on recruitment. I think that their program and I know that Bennett is just starting up another roster right now, is actually an excellent entryway into our program. His is an unpaid classroom-based program, but he's working with Evanston residents, and especially within this funding, we are looking very strongly at Evanston residents and how to increase that outreach. So I'm hoping that he can be a great partner to help pipeline and support us in recruiting successful candidates for our training. I mean, ultimately, we want candidates who are going to succeed within that 5 months and move on towards the union pathways. We also want to work with him to find those up to 30 and hopefully more than 30 people who will be get credentialed. So we'll work with him to make sure that we can find folks who both say that they're going to attend and actually do attend and complete the credentialing and certification.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Items for discussion. We have HH5, Hillard Hines report. Police Chief Cook will discuss with committee the findings of the report. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Good evening, Alderman Simmons, members of the committee. Do you all have the Hilliard Hines report? A copy of it?
It's in the packet.
Oh, at home. Okay. All right, that's why I made this presentation. Okay, I'm very familiar with the work of Hilliard Hines. I'm very good friends and professional relationship with Mr. Hilliard. I have had class under Professor Kirby, who was part of this assessment process of the Evanston Police Department. But what I want to point out first is an excerpt from the letter that Mr. Arnett Hines wrote to the city manager. And it states that our review identified an overall well-managed agency staffed by command and supervisory personnel who are truly invested in the city and the delivery of service. As with any department, opportunity exists to enhance efficiencies. But as we note throughout our report, the decision should be part of a larger strategic vision. Implementation of any recommendation requires analysis within the context of organizational goals to determine whether our recommendations will serve the needs of the department, the city, and its residents. If the city and EPD implement the recommendations in this report and ensure that they are aligned with the EPD goals and strategies, we believe that efficiencies will be achieved. And I think this report is well designed to point out some areas within the organizational structure, span of control, and to some point in unity of command on how the Evanston Police Department could leverage efficiencies within the organization. But as stated, you want to be careful on how you flatten the organization through the elimination of positions and the way that workload is dispersed among a more flattened organization. We don't know what that will yield in terms of workload, product, service delivery, and so forth. So although these are good recommendations, we have to look at them in the context of the goals as stated of the police department, and also of the goals of the alderman, your vision with this process. This is the organizational chart of the Evanston Police Department. Take a look at it. We're trying to make some efficiencies in the organizational chart. Now, the organization has been organized over many years within the city of Evanston to come up with a product to where we are now with respect to service delivery. We didn't just throw some commanders up there. We didn't just throw some sergeants in a unit. We looked at efficient placement of personnel, the efficient development of programs within the police department, going back way to the formation of NET, to the formation of the TAC team, to the formation of PST, which was formulated back in 1984. So the service delivery from these units have been placed on the chart and developed over many years of work. Okay, the key findings consist of supervisory staffing across the department. Now, in the report, they recommend that we review supervisory assignments within the context of organizational goals. Consider whether 3 sergeants provide sufficient supervision within a combined detective bureau that includes the juvenile. Under Chief Addington, they had started, prior to me getting here, to making some of these efficiencies and to limit or enhance the span of control within the police department among supervisory personnel and the officer, basically looking at the ratio of supervision to officers. Consider whether 3 sergeants provide supervision within the combined detective bureau is efficient. We're still looking at that. You can see more in the summer months with workload than you can, when it's 20 degrees outside. So, but we do think it's a process that will yield efficiency in the delivery of service and also in the economic maintenance of the police department. Okay, it says assign the school resource officers to the Community Strategies Bureau. I'm looking at that because the Community Strategies Bureau is really a division that is really stressed in terms of workload. They got 9 aldermen driving some delivery of service, plus whatever other programs may pop up. They have programs with youth. They have programs with foot patrol and things of that nature. So when you look at span of control and outside forces driving your service delivery, is that really efficient? And they'll talk more about that in this report. And I urge you all to look at that, what I just spoke about. And they're saying that the sergeants released on a daily supervision from the Detective Bureau could support a professional case management. I agree with that. We're looking at the case management program that's within the CAD system and in the RMS system within the police department. Basically, that will computerize case management. It'll have due dates that automatically pop up and things of that nature. They're still doing it a little bit paper on Excel spreadsheet, so we want to work to eliminate that type of case management. Review and assess supervision in the Special Operations Group within the context of organizational goals. I think the way the Special Operations Group is structured now is efficient for the management of high-risk Those guys deal with high-risk offenders, and they need supervision. They deal with the most serious criminals that we can come across in this organization, and they have been really efficient and cost-effective. I don't think much in terms of litigation, to my knowledge, have come out of the Special Operations Group. So I would like to maintain a high level of supervision in that group. Relatively large command staff. They're saying review the need for both an executive officer and a commander of OPS, determine whether these two commands should be combined. And they basically said unified command. I don't see that as being a good way to operate the executive officer and OPS. I think if we were going to combine both units, we can get rid of one of the commanders or reassign them to another bureau, and that's what I'm hoping we do. Prior to me coming, they had already eliminated the juvenile commander. That was pushed up into the detective bureau, so it was no need to have an additional commander there. And this is the same type of scenario we will be looking at in the situation with the executive officer and the OPS commander. Assess the need based on organizational goals and crime strategies for a commander in a special operations group in light of other recommendations. I'm still sticking with, I think a commander in that area is very important because of the level of criminal activity they deal with and the type, and also for the need to network with other agencies, other federal organizations, and other police departments. Organizational structure refined to capture efficiencies. It says combine the OPS Bureau and Executive Officer into one unified command. I don't think a unified command would work in there, because it's a very limited span of control. OPS right now currently has one sergeant. The Executive Officer has no personnel, but in this report, it talks about adding some other operational units to the executive officer. It says combine Detective Bureau and Juvenile into one cross-trained unit. I'm currently doing that now. I'm thinking that, if it's no juvenile officers working, we shouldn't have to call one in and pay them overtime to come in and deal with a juvenile issue. So all of the detectives right now are currently going under cross-training to become certified juvenile officers. Move the SROs into community strategies. I have to look at that because, you're constantly taxing community strategies with a greater workload, and one that's really not totally being controlled by the police department. Combine net and TAC into one unit. I think that'll be a good idea. I think it could be some operational efficiencies there. It doesn't matter how it looks on an organizational chart, but both of those units need supervision. They have different missions. They're on different goals. So, if a TAC unit is out, that's a high-risk unit. They need supervision, the same as with net. Align intelligence function, both intelligence and crime analysts, into the executive officer. Now, that's if we, it depends on division of the city government, in particular the city manager, his desires on how he thinks we should formulate those two units, OPS and the executive officer, if that should be brought into one unit or kept separate and add more functionality to the executive officer. Review staffing and programming goals and organizationals of the PST. Consider assigning officers to 2 wards. Basically, we're looking at $1.2 million worth of police officers assigned to the 9 aldermen, and is that operationally efficient? I understand the will of the people is what I'm here to serve, but, you know, I'm a professional in terms of determining what should be pushed up and what should be put on the back burner based on organizational goals that I've set for the police department, and also based on the workload that comes through on a daily basis external to the administration here. That's not to say that I'm totally against that, but we can't have operational efficiency and save money if one officer dealt with 2 wards. I think that was one of the best recommendations that they made here. Technology more fully exploited. Technology in the police department has been slow. We are ahead in some areas in terms of intelligence gathering and mapping. I have already instituted the process for them to get the mapping automated right out of the CAD system, so that can be a daily review. If we did that, we can also push that out to the public where they can view crimes on the map on a daily basis without us having to tell you or wait to a particular meeting to tell you what type of crime is going on in your neighborhood. So I'm looking to exploit the technology and automate some of the things there. Fully automate the investigative function within the RMS. You know, as I stated earlier, they're still using some paper forms of reporting. I would like to also automate in the police department the scheduling process. There are companies that do scheduling for police departments, and it looks at all of the factors that may inhibit you from having the full manpower and how to disperse units from other people from other units. Establish a professional case management system headed by the 4th sergeant, currently assigned to the detective in juvenile. Right now, I believe we have 3 sergeants. We have 3 sergeants, but we still think that's something that we should be looking at in terms of having better case management, not having an officer go down more than a specific number of cases, and being able to give the public timely updates on the investigation of a case. I think that's really important, and that creates more transparency and keeps us in favor with the public. Use the deployment process to develop and continuously improve loop relative to the identification of issues. We are doing that. We have a very robust intelligence officer. I've opened up the deployment process to the public. Not everybody, but the people who support us and will keep things confidential in an effort to create transparency. I've invited each of you all to a deployment meeting so you can see how we utilize our personnel. And I've had many supporters of the police department, many other neighborhood groups and so forth come in and look at our deployment process. A formal strategic plan for community outreach. The Evanston Police Department has always been the leader in community outreach in the north suburbs. We were one of the first people to have to go into community policing under the guise of Mr. Herman Goldstein, professor of community policing, and actually the person who's considered the godfather of community policing. We've always had a strategic plan for what we want to do with the PST teams in terms of networking and bringing in good citizen relationships and problem-solving methods that we, in a lot of cases, get from the aldermen. I think that's a good thing. I think that shows that we are online with what the public, meaning you all as representatives of the public, would like for us to do. It says task the Executive Officer and Community Strategies Bureau Commander with developing a formal communications plan. Most of the public communications and networking has come out of the Executive Officer, and I agree with the report that many of the divisions other than PST should have the ability to disperse information, and my deal right now is I'm having all of the commanders certified as media relations officers. You'll see that in the Chicago Fire Department. If it's a fire, it doesn't matter what command person is there. That person has the ability to disperse the information and disperse the proper information. So we are already moving forward in that direction. Work with city partners to assure awareness and share responsibility for supporting IT projects. I've been in consultation with city manager with respect to IT projects, for instance, enhancement of the city cameras is one that are pretty much managed out of the police department. We're looking at enhancing things within the Communications Bureau so that we'll have more timely communications and things of that nature. And it says measure the level of communications directed at the community. And that's easy to do. We keep track of the things we post on Facebook. We keep track of our media releases. We have a history of all of the media releases that we have put out. I would like for that to continue, but on a more expanded basis within the police department. Benefit greatly by conducting a staffing study. Many years ago, the police department did a staffing study, and we utilized the patrol allocation model, or PAM, which is a model that was put out by Northwestern University. Dr. Bill Stenzel is a staffing study expert. It costs money to have that, but I think every so often you should have a staffing study to look at where we are placing our officers on the organizational chart. Are we dispersing the proper number of personnel within these units? And I think about that on a number of occasions when I look at the number of detectives we got, when I look at staffing minimums, and you take into the factors of relief time, meaning days off, sick time, and so forth. So a staffing study would benefit us greatly in nailing down the deployment of our units in the fields as it relates to the specific units that they may be in. Continue to use data to ensure future staffing decisions are tied to organizational goals rather than past practice. If the goals of the organization or the goals of the city change with respect to the product that the police department is putting out, I do believe that we should adjust where our personnel is placed on the organizational chart. If you all are satisfied in a certain area with drugs, maybe we can utilize drug personnel more efficiently in other places. the most important aspect of any police department is patrol operations. And that's what I'm primarily concerned with in the long term, is that we can deploy people in patrol to get rapid response to issues in a timely manner. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Alderman Fleming?
Everybody's looking at me and my
have my
police
list, but-
questions. Well, so I was looking at the organizational chart. So it said in there, community strategies and PST, it said, did it say to merge those two? I didn't write down exactly what the recommendation was, but when I look on here, community strategies, looks like it's already connected to PST.
PST is community strategy.
Okay, so there was a recommendation that
It was a recommendation to merge the SROs, the school resource officers.
oh, okay, with community strategies.
Right, but they currently now assigned to the Detective Bureau. But I think, if I could ease the workload on the PST officers, I think, because what you're looking at is span of control. And that basically is how many personnel can one supervisor effectively manage. So if I expand the number of personnel there with 2 supervisors, is that efficient in terms of management? You have different views. I like to look at span of management versus span of control, because in span of management, you look at factors related to the manager. Has he been to staff at command? Has he been to the Senior Management Institute for Police? Has he been to the executive management class at Northwestern? Those comprehensive classes afford that person the decision-making power that he's going to need to answer some of the critical issues that pop up daily in the police department. So a well-trained supervisor is more capable of managing more personnel. You get what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
so, but
Yeah.
for that one, did you say you were considering that merge, or you're still, what did you say about that
Well,
one? 'Cause
yeah, I'm considering that, but I want to, I don't want to just jump on it
Right.
without consultation with the PST team, the city manager, and most importantly, and members of my command staff.
Okay, and then my other question, my statement, I guess, is when you said $1.2 billion for the problem-solving team?
Yeah, I'm looking at
that-
salaries,
Yeah, so that,
approximates.
yeah, so, I mean, again, my ward is a little more quiet, so my problem-solving officer, is not needed as much in terms of crime prevention and such. So that number was surprising. That does seem like a lot of money. If I'm just
Well-
thinking of money, and I know everyone has different things in their ward that they need officers for, but that I'm glad to hear that you're looking at that, because that does seem like a
Yeah,
lot of
you
money.
have to look at what police service costs.
Yeah, because can you explain, or in a short explanation of what are the PST? I mean, I know they do a lot of stuff, but when they're not working directly with their alderman or on a 911 call, what else are they doing?
They're responding to issues that emanate out of deployment. They're looking at crime patterns. They're supplementing patrol. They're capable of doing investigations. They're carrying out programs that may benefit youth
Okay.
and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Fisk?
Alderman Fleming, that was my question, and so thank you for asking it. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a really good report. So I also had a question about the PST officers. So in the first ward, we share PST officer with the 7th ward.
Yes, ma'am.
And my understanding is that there are at least 2 other wards that share a PST officer. So we had sort of been following the recommendation that there are some wards that need a dedicated PST officer to a
Yes.
single ward. And that's something that you're looking at, is that
Yes,
correct?
there are, my vision is to have more people on foot building relationships.
I love
Let's get
that.
out of the car. Let's get into the neighborhoods. Let's get to know the folks in the community. And hopefully, I don't want to limit that education of becoming knowledgeable in the community to the problem-solving team. We need to get the patrolman out of the car and getting to know people in the neighborhood, and that's my goal. And I'm thinking the problem-solving team, since they have extensive experience in relationship building, and I think they do an excellent job in that, would be to have them spearhead a mentoring kind of program within patrol operations to push the philosophy of community policing and problem-solving.
Well, I love our PST officer, so, I mean,
It's a great unit,
he knows
and I
everything
think
in the
they have.
downtown.
I think they have the knowledge to become facilitators, internal.
Right.
The police department to push out a better product, better than what we've been given to the
Right.
public.
Right.
Hopefully, with that, with the problem-solving team spearheading this type of campaign internally, hopefully we can look at better ways to limit or minimize litigation. That's my primary goal, to minimize litigation.
Thank you. I too had the question about PST, and then how many wards have a designated PST officer?
Every ward has
I mean, that doesn't share one.
I think 3.
Okay,
Yeah, I think in your ward is 4 assigned there.
right.
So, I have to look at what is the goal of the police department in terms of crime fighting in the city of Evanston, and how do we disperse resources within the city to attack issues citywide versus one specific neighborhood. And that's not to minimize the needs of any neighborhood, but I want to do it as efficiently as possible.
Thank you. You mentioned that all detectives will be cross-trained in juvenile.
Yes.
Could you tell me, is that a best practice, or how do they go together?
Yeah,
They seem so different.
Yeah,
So could you-
we always, going back in the 80s, we cross-trained detectives as juvenile officers because the practice then was when it was not a juvenile officer working, we'd have to call one in and pay them time and a half. But when you have everyone certified as a juvenile officer, the detective, any detective can handle a juvenile case. And the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board has made it easy to become certified as a juvenile officer. You can take it online and then go take the test. I think that's a good way, in the village of Glenwood, where I was a police chief, I had every policeman certified as a juvenile officer because they will sit around and hold these kids in the police department for unnecessarily long periods of time waiting on the juvenile officer to get there. Now you're a juvenile officer, get to work.
That's great. And then lastly, the public deployment, but confidential. How are you balancing that?
Well, we have discussion with our intelligence officer prior to the meeting
Okay.
on what we're going to talk about confidentially behind closed doors. I still think that public knowledge of how we deploy people benefits us in terms of building a relationship. You can have people understand that we look at the city as a whole, and we move personnel to where we can put out a fire really quick. That's why it's really important for me to have control of all of my police officers. As it gets hot in the summer, I may have to take your PST guy for a minute and move him somewhere else. That's a saturation deal to saturate a particular area to put the crime out real quick. And I've done that since I've been here on Howard Street, where we had a lot of volatility. And I think moving those personnel down there help put the fires out down there so that we can continue the great economic development that y'all been doing down there. People want to walk to their cars and not be a victim of a shooting or run over or any of that. So that's why I moved to have control, and that's only one aspect of management control, coaching, mentoring, all that. I'm with all of that, but I need to control where I send my people. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Is there any action to take on this? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
HH6, we have Police Complaint Assessment Committee recommendations. Who do we have for that? Chief Cook, we have you again for Police Complaint Assessment Committee recommendation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a discussion. Do you have a report, an update? Police Complaint Assessment Committee recommendation. Anything?
On which is it a case I was supposed to have?
No. So we'll move on to HH7. Thank you.
Can I ask him a quick question about
Yes,
that though?
you can.
Because since Karen was here to speak about it, and when I was the chair, we asked
Oh,
the
okay.
chief to so I met with the committee chair and the chief about the citizens police review, whatever the
Oh
committee was
yeah,
called.
I've met with Karen's group
Right.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question following up to what she said in terms of some things that maybe could be implemented that don't cost any money. And I had a question about the intake outside of the police department because I thought that we had an officer here who was doing intake. Is that still correct?
I'm not sure if it's an officer here, but I know that it's done out of City Hall. When the public don't trust the intake system or believe that we're doing a great job at intaking citizen complaints, we have to look at as many ways as possible to decentralize the complaint process. And I'm not opposed to decentralization of the complaint process. It has been decentralized. You can go online, you can come into the police department. I've gotten some great ideas from people that I've met with. In particular, Karen's group recommended that I formulate a volunteer group of educated professionals who would be willing to look at the intake process. My primary goal is that the police department manage the investigation. Now, on the back end of the complaint process, where it's at Human Services, which I consider to be the primary citizen review board for police action and critiquing police practice, my situation is that I believe it's a good practice for the police officer, the supervisor, to come before the Human Services Committee and have a supervisor of that officer who was working the night of the particular incident explain what his police officer did. I don't think it's necessarily the job of OPS to be explaining what a police officer did on the third watch when those supervisors were working. So what I'm hoping that process creates is a greater level of accountability in the supervision of police. I'm hoping that makes the police supervisor say, I need to get out here and do a little bit better job in managing what our police officers engage in. But I want people to know that I'm looking at it not to be punitive, but I'm looking for it because these officers are going to be the future police leaders here. And they'll have a doorway in already in the accountability process that, look what I'm doing. I'm standing here being accountable. Everybody need to understand that this is the wave of the future and that we have to answer not only to the government officials, but the higher power, which is the people.
Well, thank you. And then the only thing that I would love for you to think about is that, and you might not do it the way that they have it recommended, but the dispute resolution, when I sit on CPAC and, sometimes read those reports, it does seem, or I would hope, that some citizens who've had an unpleasant interaction with a police officer, that can be resolved through a conversation.
Yeah, I would hope that
And
could be.
I think if that can be offered, sometime during the investigation or after the investigation as an option, we can get to that.
Yeah, and I told a group that, I have to look at what is permissible under the police officer's Bill of Rights. I can't make the police officer if it's a issue, a possible issue of discipline. If the citizen don't like what the police officer says in the dispute resolution, then they say, I want to file a complaint. And so then that whole process is compromised. So that is, I'm progressive with some of this stuff, but I have people to account to. I have a boss that I work for, and I respect what he asked me to do. And some of these battles ain't mine. I think that some of these groups need to get with government and hash out these kind of issues.
I agree, and you have 9 bosses, I would say, and I know that you're progressive, and I know you can do that.
Name 9 of them.
First
Robin
floor, second
Simmons.
floor. But I think that there is a way that this can be done. I think, Evanston as a city, we want to be a restorative justice city. I know police have a contract. I don't know all what's in it, but I think that there is a way that we can offer this as a way for our officers and the citizen to hopefully, I would hope, I'm not asking for right now, and then I would also encourage you, wherever you are in your process, to think about our current CPAC committee and just the effectiveness of that, or is it time to modernize that as well? So those are my suggestions.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
H87, we have staff proposes the implementation strategy cover 2 calendar years, 2019 and 2020, and a new 2-year implementation strategy be developed every 2 years. This is for the Climate Action and Resilience Plan implementation strategy. Thank you. Kumar?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Manager Richardson, Kumar Jensen, Chief Sustainability and Resilience Officer. I'm here today to talk about the implementation strategy that was requested by City Council at the December 2018 meeting, where the Climate Action Plan was approved unanimously. And so it was requested that I bring back a full implementation strategy for the plan. In looking over the document and speaking with the Environment Board and some other stakeholders, we, because the plan has 121 actions identified in it, we chose to look at all of them, but propose a 2-year strategy moving forward, because we felt that aligned with the City Council goals process, but also allowed us to create more manageable chunks of items. So what I have today is this evening is a presentation. I want to just give a little background as to the prioritization criteria. So as we were looking through the items, we came up with 6 different things that we wanted to look at in terms of criteria of the deciding which actions would make it into this first round of implementation strategy. These are all included in the memo, and I'm glad to come back to them, but I'm not going to read all the way through them since you have this in front of you as well. And then these are the last 3 as well. And so we looked at these in more of a qualitative way at this first opportunity. And so we are looking to develop a stronger methodology that we can continue to refine and bring forward every time we update the implementation strategy. So as was also mentioned in the memo, we are proposing that this strategy cover 2 years, and that is primarily because the plan sets forward milestones that are pretty significant, and a lot of this stuff does have some significant runway time, and so it takes some planning, it takes some evaluation. There are a number of actions that we're already working on and making progress on, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it's a little complicated, but what we'd like to focus on is working to align this implementation strategy cycle with the budget cycle, so that you all are receiving the proposed implementation strategy before the next fiscal year budget so that you can review those, because this year, obviously, the FY 2019 budget has already been approved. So there's a little bit of a change up there for 2019. As a reminder, again, this stuff is all in the plan. As we are looking through the actions and thinking about how we are going to deploy them and move forward with the development of the policies, but also many of the projects and programs, in the plan, the Climate Action and Resilience Plan Working Group identified 3 guiding principles that are to really ensure that the plan meets its intended goals, which are quite ambitious. And again, I'm not going to read through all these, but I'm glad to come back and talk to them because now that we are getting into implementation, we need some additional specificity as to how we will use those principles to ensure that the plan meets its stated goals. So I have included the tables that are included in attachment A of the memo, and I broke up the table into 2019 and 2020 so that you could look at what items are being proposed for in the current year versus things that we've suggested happen in 2020. And the primary reason to do that is budgetary. So a lot of the items that were moved to 2020, there's less certainty around potential funding sources, and funding sources haven't necessarily been identified for a lot of the ones in the 2020 version. So we wanted to make sure that there was ample time to have that conversation during the budget process. I will come back to this. There are a couple that I want to highlight in 2019 and 2020 that I've called out, and so I'll get through, and then we can come back and talk about specific ones.
Okay, that's okay, Alderman Fisk. Thank you.
Excellent. So 2019, Table 1, this says the actions that we've listed as 1 through 14. And then the second set of them, 2019, we've got a lot of things in there that we need to get working on. And a lot of them, as you can see in the status column, there is progress being made. And then for 2020, it is a smaller set of them. They are no less impactful. And as you can see, the cost and the funding columns, there's not as much detail because we have not had those conversations with each individual department and with the budget team to understand how these would actually be operationalized. So I want to talk just a summary looking at both of them together because that is a lot of different pieces. So the actual plan has 121 actions. This implementation strategy has 43 in total. There are a number of actions that are listed in the implementation strategy that are not specifically called out within CARP, but they support some of the other actions or goals within CARP, and so we thought that they were appropriate to include in the strategy because they support some of the goals. The total cost, that is the identified areas where where department heads have been able to come up with the cost of what they believe those projects would take to implement. I also broke out the FY 2019 Good Neighbor Fund. All of that funding has been identified, that $75,000 in projects for 2019. We do have two grant applications, one that was awarded, and the city will be making that announcement in a week as to what that is. And then the other, which is for the majority of that money is for $250,000 for a project that I'm going to talk about in a moment, and we will know whether or not we've been selected in May of this year. So that's why you see the cost of the city being different than the anticipated total cost of all those strategies. So I'm going to just talk through 3 examples and then be glad to talk about any of the other items and the process by which we want to move forward. We're recommending that we move forward with this. So earlier this year, as in action number 12, the Office of Sustainability, in conjunction with Economic Development, launched a program we're calling Sustain Evanston. It's in its pilot phase. It's a sustainable business recognition program where we're providing cash incentives and technical support, so that's staff time and connections with some of our partner agencies like the utilities to ensure that we're supporting businesses in their interest in helping us achieve the goals of the Climate Action Plan. One of the areas that was identified in the process of developing the plan was that businesses were not necessarily receiving the same level of support around things like renewable energy and waste reduction and composting that residences were. And so this really rose to the top. And so we're going through a beta program. So here are the details of that, or actually it's a pilot program. So we are offering a cash $350 incentive to any business. I think we have over 10 that are part of the pilot program. This is a good highlight of the Good Neighbor funds. So we're using those funds to finance this program. And so we've gotten a lot of really great interest, and we're excited to see the full launch hopefully in May or June of this year. The comprehensive stormwater plan. So the need, if you go back and look at CARP, we identified quite a few different climate hazards that were Evanston specific. And one of the ones that we have certainly felt and is very visible locally is intense and more extreme precipitation events. So that's not only snow, but also rain and sleet. And working with Public Works, we have realized that one of the pieces of guidance that we are lacking is a plan to govern not just what areas of the city may be experiencing flooding and additional risk related to extreme precipitation, but also what land uses and specific properties even may be less well prepared to respond to those threats. And so it's not just about where is all the water going, but what property is it ending up on, and how well equipped are those properties to actually deal with that water when it does arrive. We do know that we will not necessarily be able to just build bigger and bigger pipes to get out of this, and so we need to come up with a strategy that is looking at a variety of different solutions. And then the last one, so this is action number 9 in the implementation strategy. This is the grant that I was talking about. So we submitted a project in collaboration with a couple of organizations, the Evanston Community Foundation, the Chicago Community Trust, and the Center for Neighborhood Technology for $250,000 over 2 years to do what we're calling is we're trying to identify the barriers that primarily low and moderate income housing and affordable housing units face in achieving some of the standards and goals that were set out in the Climate Action Plan. And so one of those, as Action 3, we sort of mentioned at the top, calls for the development of a building code that will require buildings in Evanston to be net zero energy by 2030. So that would be the standard. And we recognize, particularly if you go back and we look at the guiding principles, that if the city moves forward with that recommendation, as is in CARP, there are numerous properties in Evanston that are not necessarily equipped to be able to respond to that that charge. And so we want to make sure we're getting well ahead of that, because that standard is set out there for 2030 to make sure that we are working to identify the barriers now that they may face and work with them to work to overcome those. Those may be policy changes, it may be financing, it may be more things that are in the private sphere, but there may also be building and zoning code issues that are coming into play that we're not aware of. And so from a process standpoint, the way that we have been looking at this implementation strategy is that many of the ones that are in here for 2019 and 2020, but primarily 2019, are administrative tasks. And so that doesn't mean they don't come with a cost, but there aren't 15 different ordinances or a bunch of different resolutions that are being called for immediately off the bat. A lot of the work is evaluation and additional layers of planning. And so what staff would like to do is recommend that we come back in April and we actually talk a little bit more about policy development. And so there are some policies that are recommended, like the net zero building code, and looking at single-use plastics and, potentially revising the plastic disposable shopping bag ban, things like that we would like to come back and receive guidance from this committee on how to move forward with that process. So that's what I have for this evening. I'd be glad to take questions.
Alderman Fisk.
Can we go back to the beginning? I guess I'm going to take back my okay that we not ask questions during the presentation, because now I can't even remember my questions.
Where would you like?
Where I started from. So, I've got a ton of questions. Again, I've been absolutely agree with everything you're saying. There's no question about that. Looking at our housing stock and the cost, where we're progressing in terms of age of our community, I would like that to be, one of the things that is under consideration. The ability, again, in my ward, I have a lot of seniors who, on fixed incomes, who would have trouble with this. I have lots of small businesses that are struggling to survive that, and I can tell you stories about the costs of, even for a lot of them, replacing light bulbs was huge. That's just, very much the beginning of all of it. Can you tell me about the $250,000 cost for the grant, the Partners for Places grant? Now, are we joining with the Evanston Community Foundation and applying for it, or is that where?
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little?
Absolutely. So Partners for Places is a national program as a part of the Funders Network. And so the Funders Network is a group of national funders that got together a little over a decade ago and wanted to work to support and encourage local place-based foundations to invest in sustainability initiatives with their local communities. And so they've essentially created what they're calling it's like a matching grant program. So they then ask applicants to work with their community foundations or place-based foundations to jointly submit a grant request.
Okay, wait, back up. So does that, so who's is the city going to have to put money toward that?
No,
or is
absolutely
the Evanston
not.
Community Foundation is going to do that?
So the Chicago Community Trust and the Evanston Community Foundation have both put in the match for our grant. In fact, cities are not even allowed.
Each are putting in $125,000. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, so the actual total project cost would be $250,000. They combined to put in $125,000, and then we would receive
Okay.
Yeah, and so we actually, as the city, do not receive those funds, and we are not actually allowed to provide match dollars. They really want this to be a relationship building process where the local foundations are providing that.
Okay, and then the other things we don't know are the whether the Good Neighbor Fund is going to have money in it next year, or I think the year after that. I'm not sure how many years are left, whether that fund is even going to continue. So that's roughly $70,000 that's coming from there.
So that's all allocated for fiscal year 2019.
Yeah, no, I
Right.
understand that, but and we don't know about next year.
Absolutely.
So the staff, the new staff position that was on there for what, $90,000?
I believe it's in 2020. Yes, number 3, action 3. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. So the utility operations analyst. Tell me what that person would do.
Right. So there's the idea behind this position is to really be able to focus on some of our energy management decisions in city operations and facilities. And so one of the things that we do currently is that we purchase electricity and we manage a franchise electric agreement with ComEd, and we also do track and some of our energy data. But we are not looking necessarily at all of those things together to identify cost savings from a municipal operations standpoint. And so one of the and the reason why it's sort of TBD, there aren't a lot of details, is because this is a conversation we need to continue having as to whether or not this is an appropriate position. But the goal behind it is to be able to better understand municipal energy and utility planning needs as well. So also another example of a task may be looking at future construction projects, potentially future community centers, and working into them requirements and ways to reduce their energy load and energy demand, because that's an operational cost we then bear into the future.
Did we do that with Robert Crown, with the Robert Crown planning?
So Crown, we did ask for information and data on their energy models into the process, but we did not have energy management specs beyond code, to my knowledge, within that project, and that's something that we certainly should be doing moving forward. Is in all of our projects, having more clear sets of standards for what we would like to see, because as you may know, it's much more cost effective to include, when you're designing and building a building,
right,
energy efficiency and building envelope and weather sealing type things in the design, rather than trying to go back in and change out windows or insulate a roof or do the many things that do have a substantial benefit.
Right, right. Okay, so I mean, just as a message to the city manager, I mean, this is wonderful. I'm really going to be focused on the cost, and especially how we prepare our homeowners and our business community, our property owners, to comply if we decide to pass a lot of these things. It's going to be tough for people. It really is. So I want to be sensitive to that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Alderman Fisk. I share your concern there. Starting with the the green business pilot, is the goal to continue on with a cash incentive for green business compliance?
Yes. Exactly. So the incentive, there's an incentive difference. So it's $350 at the moment for pilot businesses. And then once the pilot phase is over, and we've incorporated that feedback, we would then do $250 for recognition.
Did you reach your goals and participation for the pilot?
We have over 10 businesses, yes, so we did meet our goal.
Okay, perfect. And then back to the net zero housing, will that be policy or is that a goal? Because as Alderman Fisk stated, the barriers, you said you have to work to identify the barriers. The barriers seem to be obvious, and that's cost and affordability. Our housing stock here is all drafty, so how could we possibly enforce something like this with the population that we have here?
So I would say there's a couple ways to think about this. One is that the way that this language is written is actually would most likely be for new buildings and renovations of a certain size. And so when we look at the grant program, that actually, we perceive that would actually not necessarily be looking, it would not primarily be looking at new construction. It would be looking at existing and saying, how do we help the people now who are living, or how do we identify sort of what their barriers are to meeting a standard, not necessarily saying we're going to develop a standard that would then be retroactive to existing property owners. That specificity was not at all included within the climate action plan. So I would say they are related, but they're different in who the intended audience is.
Okay. And I just want to be real direct with the language. You said some property owners won't be equipped to respond. We're again talking about affordability. So as we have an affordable housing discussion, I don't want that to get lost in how these green efforts can impact affordability. So if we could be clear about the language that this is all about cost burden to many, many homeowners.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then I want to make sure, and I'm sure that you are already in touch with Ms. Leslie Shad, who has put together a climate ordinance, which maybe was a little premature now to introduce, but if you could work with Leslie and figure out a way how we can maybe incorporate what the ordinance that group is proposing and our work that's already been done with CARP, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman Ravel?
I think we all have a lot of thoughts about the this Partners for Places grant that we are hoping to get. I mean, I think it's really good that we're acknowledging that there are going to be some serious affordability challenges for a number of our residents. And, given that equity is one of our key principles for the plan, I think it's really good that we're pursuing this funding to help us, really develop a strategy to help our residents. Because ultimately, as residents do make their homes more energy efficient, that will help them save money on their utility bills. So eventually, it'll be a big benefit to them. Just a couple of other things. Preparing a comprehensive stormwater plan, is that something that our current staff is going to be able to do? Are we going to hire somebody to help us with that, or?
So currently in conversations with Dave Stonebeck, I believe the way that we're looking at this would be to hire somebody temporarily. Mm-hmm. And so this would be a full-time staff person, potentially on a 2 or 3 year contract to do this work. The other way to look at parts of it is to hire a consultant to do it, but the way that Dave has communicated that to me is that the workload would be pretty similar to a full-time staff, and we could have that person do some other additional work, particularly related to looking at some of the maps and some of the other data we have related to like building age and other types of critical infrastructure that may exacerbate issues of flooding in certain parts of the city. If we have an internal staff person working on that, we may be able to better connect those dots.
Okay. And then I think you mentioned at the beginning that you've been discussing some of this implementation plan with the Environment Board. So is the Environment Board raising its hand to help out with any specific pieces of this, or?
Absolutely. So the Environment Board has already identified four of the CARP focus areas that they want to pay particularly close attention to, but they are also very, and so those, I mean, absolutely, they've been explicit sort of commitment to follow through and focus on them, and they're also very interested in having in some of their communications that they've already sent to the full city council and the mayor and the city manager, CARP be included at a high level in the goal setting process as well. But staff have begun to start bringing them content related to the focus areas that they are interested in continuing to look at.
Yeah, right. Well, this is certainly very ambitious, as is CARP itself, and but very well thought through in terms of taking some really big steps forward. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Alderman Fleming?
Just real quick, couple things on here that were of interest to me, and hopefully we can move forward on them since they don't necessarily cost any money. So the phasing out of the single-use, plastic bags and straws and such, I understand that that is a commitment, but being that so many other cities have started doing that, I would think that, I would hope that that's something that we can really be aggressive about, and it wouldn't be something that people, have never heard of, and it would just be kind of changing those personal habits. And particularly from my ward, the community solar, I know I've had people who have started installing, their own solar and have talked about, kind of community solar panels with a lot of single family homes and larger yards. I know there have been people who have talked about having interest in having panels in their backyards. And so hopefully, again, that education component kind of gets started so that people, if they're interested in doing that, can have some guidance from the city. And, if there are any kind of regulations that we need to help with, that we're definitely on board for that. And then I want to just thank you for including my 9th Ward resident who's very interested in the demolition and debris. He's actually had a newborn, so he's a little bit off the radar now. But, he's very interested in participating in that. And that was very interesting for me to learn kind of what the county does and what's working, and kind of one of those policies that sounds really good, but maybe it's not working as well. So I'm hopeful that as we have a lot of people who are coming to the city looking to build, that we can really be aggressive about that and make sure when they come here to build that we're clear to them what our expectations are with their debris. So thank you for taking those on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Kumar.
Thank you.
We have now HH8, we have a discussion of lakefront special events with no connection to Evanston nonprofit. What? Oh, okay. Thank you. Alderman Fisk, take it away.
Thank you very much. It sounds like me too, doesn't it? Lawrence, so I have been concerned about the possible increase in organizations. These are profit-making groups who identify local partners and then come in and develop an organized event. And what I'm concerned about is that the corporate sponsors take away the large chunk of the money that's raised, leaving the charitable events with very, very little. So I've asked Lawrence if there is a way for us to take a look at what the breakdown is. I'm not against people making money, but it sounds a little bit iffy to me in some cases. So I would just like to have a study of that, of who these organizations are, their corporate structure, what percentage of the revenue raised that they take, and how much revenue actually goes to the local charity.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the committee. Alderman Fisk, I think if I can just point you to page 17 in your packet, I believe it is here. We did a quick analysis of lakefront events and the nonprofits that are associated with those events. Well, the next step we'll do is start to work with the organizations on the funding aspect in terms of how much is raised and what's actually going back to the events. But we put together charts that a chart that has the events that take place in our parks as well as those just along the lakefront, and listed the nonprofit that benefits at this time. And so.
And I understand that, sure, that we've had that information, and that's been shared with us at every Human Services every year when we do this. And I don't want it to be limited to the lakefront. I'm just really curious as to whether who's making the money here, and I'm worried that our charities aren't.
Okay.
So
yeah, we'll work on that document and get that report back to the committee.
Thank you, Alderman Fleming. I'm sorry, Alderman Fisk, for bringing that up. I guess you're on my mind, Cicely. Yes. Okay, so we are at HH9. We have, the Youth and Young Adult Division update. Mr. Brown, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to members of the committee. It's always an honor and a pleasure to stand before you and to deliver some information regarding the Youth and Young Adult Division. We've been in operation since 2012, and in that 7 years that we've been operating, we've gotten lots of questions over the years about what our role is in workforce development. And I wanted to just briefly, since we're at the end of the night, they told me I had about 60 minutes. Is that correct? No,
that's incorrect.
So we're here at the end of the night, so I'm not going to belabor you with too much, take up too much of your time, but I do want to point out some things that I do think are very important in regards to workforce development. Since the City Council is engaging in that discussion, every single member has asked questions about it, and we have had a pivotal role in workforce development with the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program, which is a signature program that's been around since 1992. But I wanted to sort of point you, we created this rough draft of a update, status report, and we're working on it, and we're happy to bring it back to you at a later time in a finished form. It will be also posted online. But I wanted to point out to you on on the second page of this document, it talks about the mission of the Youth and Young Adult Division, which is to facilitate effective public-private collaborative partnerships that ensure the following: recruitment, training, and retention of Evanston youth and young adult workforce that possesses the skill sets needed to compete in the 21st century. To ensure academic, vocational, certificate, and entrepreneurial internships, externships, and apprenticeship programming opportunities. To ensure the coordination of the City of Evanston programs and projects that impact youth and young adults, and then to develop promotion of civic responsibility and engagement. We have a very comprehensive youth development model that's based on a federal model for dealing with juvenile delinquency. And that particular federal model follows that mission statement, and it talks about the Youth and Young Adult Division being involved with community mobilization, which is what we do. We work with former gang-involved youth, we work with at-risk youth, we work with community groups and agencies, and all of our programs are coordinated and our staff functions are coordinated across agencies, with agencies like the Moran Center and the YOU and the YJC. You heard from an agency tonight which is involved in workforce development that we work with. And we help this particular rebuilding warehouse recruit individuals. So along with the Minority Businesses Consortium, which is another agency that we work with. So we have several areas within the model that I'm not going to go through every single one, but you see the community mobilization, the opportunities provision, the social intervention, the suppression, and then the organizational change and development. And then we kind of highlight the staff. We are understaffed at the moment. We are filling as you know, we lost Portia Davis. And so Mr. Nathan Norman has assumed that role on an interim basis, and we are filling the opening for an outreach position with a seasonal position until we're able to get up to speed with staffing. And we have 2 part-time positions that we also have to fill, which council funded. But I want to point out really briefly something that I don't want to say it bothers me, but I want people to really understand the significance of some of the work in terms of the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program. And if you flip past the staff pages, you come to a programs page. And in the programs page, you have from 2012 to 2018, which is highlighted, the numbers of summer jobs that we have been able to produce since 2012. And sometimes I don't think that I think the community understands it, but then there are some people in the community that may not fully comprehend the amount of work that has gone into going from 160 positions to over 600 summer youth positions a year. And our last police chief and our current police chief both certify, or they both endorse the fact that these summer jobs have a significant impact on the quality of life for our young adults and our community in terms of crime prevention and reduction. And so because the council has been so generous and because our private business community has been so generous, we've been able to produce a significant number of summer jobs for young people. And that work has been done by outreach staff who are working with private businesses and families in this community. There's a page that sort of highlights what wards these individuals are coming from, as well as about 70% of them do receive free and reduced lunch. And then in that ward map, it talks about what percentage within your ward who participated in the summer jobs program, what percentage of those individuals qualified for free and reduced lunch. So it's a whole mixture of people who are both low income, moderate income, and middle and high income individuals. That page is followed by another program that I think is extremely important, that has been around since 2012. It's a workforce development program, the Building Career Pathways to Sustainable Employment program. It's had 143 total participants to date. It is a program that provides young adults with paid work experiences as direct hires with the Youth Job Center. It's a partnership between the Youth Job Center and the City of Evanston. One of the numbers that is a significant figure is the 60% of the individuals that have participated in that program who have been employed for a year or longer. That is above the national average for this particular kind of program, and it has been an extremely successful program to date. Over 100 employers have participated. 63 people within that program completed various certifications, which is what the program is designed to do, is to help an individual to develop a career pathway.
Is the 63 over 24 months, or is it over?
So it's 63 individuals over that, within that 143 who've obtained some certification since 2012.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our most successful program to date, and I'm coming to a close, I did want to give Sharon Johnson an opportunity, because the MWBE and the local employment program, we also work with them in a workforce development capacity. But the Northwestern University Skilled Trades program was a very successful program that we had since 2012. There were 24 participants. 20 of those 24 were hired into long-term employment, and 18 of those people are still working at Northwestern University in full-time jobs. So I don't think people always appreciate the significance of that kind of a program. It's something that I hope will continue. I know we are in discussions with the university because it's a quite expensive program. It's about $330,000 per year for 6 program participants. But it is a valuable program, and the university has 18 Evanston residents that it did not have before the program started. Just in terms of an update, you'll see that we worked with Mr. David's flooring. We've worked with Oakton Community College on a CDL program. We've worked with the Chicago Urban League. And I think that one of the things that I want to highlight in terms of working with a variety of partners is that the Youth and Young Adult Division, with this family services workforce development type of programming, has been quite efficient in terms of the budget that we have, which is a large percentage of our budget goes directly just to year-round and summer employment, but yet we are able to utilize staff time to make connections to other partners within the community and outside of our community. Finally, within that report, you'll see a client profile to look at the numbers of clients that we have served over the last 7 years, what their, how many males, how many females, how many of those clients have been high risk, what are the high risk factors, what their educational profile was. 41% of them were 18 years of age and over, 59% were younger than age 18, who the numbers of jobs that we helped people to obtain. Some of those jobs were career pathway oriented. Some of those jobs were basically jobs to help people to establish a career path. But we helped over 1,088 people. We helped people with resumes, government IDs, transportation assistance, health care, violence interruption, conflict resolution services, and a number of other family support types of services. I'm going to come to a close because the night is late, but I did want to give Sharon Johnson an opportunity to kind of share just for a few moments how we work together with her particular program. And then, as I said before, we'll come back. We'll do something a lot more comprehensive for the City Council if we're asked to do so. But we want you to know, and we thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair, to share the workforce component of the programs and their impact on the Evanston community.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We can definitely not have a complete workforce development conversation without including the work that you're doing in outreach. It's fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Ms. Johnson?
May I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Just can you elaborate, because I think it was in the Daily Northwestern or somewhere I read about the employment piece. So I know it was cut out at Northwestern because of funding. So you said you're currently in conversation with them about bringing that back?
Well, I know that I have had a conversation with Dave Davis. He has been speaking with other individuals. I believe the city manager has contacted him. He could speak to that himself. We don't know the prospects of whether or not they will bring the program back, but we have had comments from Mr. Davis as well as others at the university who acknowledged the fact that it was an important program, that it was a valuable program, and we need to work together to find a way to bring it back. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Sharon Johnson. I'm responsible for monitoring the local employment program as well as the minority women and Evanston-based business compliance for the city of Evanston. So I just want to be brief this evening and underscore what Mr. Brown was speaking about with regard to workforce development. Go over just a few items regarding the local employment program for the city, the database that the city maintains for potential workers that we have, regarding capital improvement projects and people who are currently interested in working for local projects with regard to our city projects. Roughly about 99.9% of these projects are union signatory, so I work with over close to a dozen unions and union representatives for the apprentice programs with regard to unions. Sheet metal, laborers, carpenters, and electricians. So these are primarily people who were used on the Northwestern projects. And I work closely with these representatives to create benefits for local residents, to learn some of the trends, inside tracks that are available for some of the residents that we have here who are interested in trade work, to create a viable path for a pre-apprentice program as well. We need a more robust effort for that. Some of the challenges that we have for a few of the workers or potential workers that are interested are things like math courses, so they can be apprentice ready to be union ready. For example, they need to learn how to correctly read a tape measure for measuring floors, windows, walls, and things of that nature. Also, working with these organizations and community-based organizations, it creates determined skills to
determine what's available in the labor market for our residents and make them more viable to have a sustainable career path, in addition to understanding the range of opportunities available. So I've had a lot of interest from residents who are interested in pursuing this, and I'm grateful for the committee that I am responsible for reporting to, the MWEB committee, and Madam Chair for that opportunity, and just wanted to briefly let you know that information. Thank you very much. Are there any questions quickly or nothing?
Any discussion? Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing. We have HH10, update on the dog beach. Director Hemingway.
Nicola, you got the mouse.
Oh, you just,
Where'd it go? Which one, right here?
no, you
Did I close it?
closed it, right? That's okay.
Well, I kind of was going
It was,
to I can do it
okay,
if
here,
you,
just take it.
I need the
I don't have the
keyboard.
keyboards on the desk.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Do you, is there something else we can do to help you?
Well,
He has the,
you
he
want,
has the keyboard.
here, can you do it while I do
Yeah, I can do it. Let's keep it moving.
All right. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. What I want to do is, I kind of, Alderman Fisk asked that we just come and get a public an update. And what I really wanted to do is kind of explain to you how we monitor the Dog Beach besides our physical, going out to the beach, standing, taking pictures, how we track and use the data that is, that's out there from, NOAA, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, et cetera. And I kind of wanted to give just a historical picture of water levels, which is really important that I think the community understands. So that's the website. If you give me a second, I can pull it up, and we'll be able to show that historical picture in terms of water levels. Yes, ma'am.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
How much, if I remember correctly, we have about 1,000, or we had about 1,000 permit holders for the dog beach in the past? Is that roughly correct?
Correctly. Over the past, in its peak years, you average about that. We've brought in about 60,000, over around 60,000 at the high end.
Okay.
The last year we operated the dog beach was in 2017, and we had just about 40,000 at that time.
Okay, and then we require special immunizations for the dogs, and I'm assuming they go to local veterinarians to do that.
Yeah.
No, we apologize. It happens. We got it.
Yes, Alderman Fisk, we, all dog beach users are required to have their animals vaccinations up to speed.
And again, my understanding from, I don't personally use the dog beach, but from folks I know that do, it's roughly about $200 for them to get the immunizations. So so that plus, and what is the cost of a annual permit per dog?
About $60. Well,
Okay,
60.
so $60. So they're spending roughly $250 to take their dogs to the dog beach and meet all the requirements.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, as a dog owner myself, my vet visit is, probably a little bit higher than that annually, but yes, that's what it costs at minimum. Okay. Thank you. If I can direct your attention here, let me get you just pull up Lake Michigan here so that you guys can see. So you guys have it. I need to get to this corner. Let me get over here to this corner. Okay, let's go here, do that, get rid of that. So, okay. what you're seeing here on the screen, this is a data of water levels of Lake Michigan that is kept by the Great Lakes Environmental and Research Lab, which is an arm of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And the time frame here, I got to scroll down here because this just shows you the current time frame, but I want to show you a historical picture. So I can change, as you see along the bottom, kind of, they've been monitoring the data since about 1918 of water levels. And so with that, if you go back to the beginning of time when the water levels of Lake Michigan have started to being kept, this red line is just the average. That's the average over the time that the data has been kept. The light blue lines is the monthly recordings over time, and then the darker blue lines is the annual averages. And I'll try to move this out the way, and everything won't fit on one screen here, but we'll get through this here. Trying to scroll over. There you go. So if you take a look, so we use this in the department. I mean, this is how we forecast our decisions. But just looking at this historical picture, you get to see how the water levels are above and below that red line. If that's just the average over time, you can look over the course of these decades when the water was low. So I'm going to shorten my time frame, and I'm going to go back to the 1990s up to current standards, so you can really get a chance to see what is taking place here. All right, so if you go back to your early 90s, you had water levels that kind of was around the average, but then they went up. And as you see here, they start to go up, they go down, a little above the average, but then they kind of peak in the late 90s, right before they drop. And when they dropped, going into the early 2000s, you went into what was a 15-year time span of record low water levels. And that's what you see here. And so the Dog Beach that we currently, the community came to know and enjoy, came into place in the late 90s, early 2000s because of those low levels. But as you see, based upon the historical data, that space or that sand area was not always available due to the high water levels. I arrived here in Evanston a little over 3 years ago, and the first thing that I walked into was high water levels. And as you can see, we have the last couple of years, we have struggled because the water levels has started to rise again. Now, what we don't know is how long they'll be high, but right now, all the projections are projecting high water levels. And so it may be 1 year, it may be a few years, it may be 10 years that the current space that we call the Dog Beach may not be available to us, but we just don't know. But we monitor this information, and we're in constant contact with the authorities who do this work to kind of help us think about our decisions. So for 2019, I want to let the public know we are not anticipating operating the current Dog Beach space because all of the levels, all of the projections is that the water levels will be high.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I understand that, and this is helpful, and this is available online. I'm guessing that we can all take.
Yeah, I can give you the website.
Okay, so we also have Pooch Park that we share with the Village of Skokie, and so how much does an Evanston resident pay for Pooch Park?
I mean, your park pass is about, I believe it's $42 or $38. It's just right in that range.
Okay, but the Dog Beach was on, the charge for the Dog Beach was on top of that. That was extra, right? The Pooch Park pass did not allow you to.
Yes, separate. It is separate,
Okay, so
in addition to.
It was separate. Okay, so I'm focused on the budget, trying to look at revenue. We've got At the high point, roughly $60,000 that we've lost because of the rising lake levels. My understanding is that we can't dredge out the sand at that point because it'll come back in a day and it'll cost us more to dredge than we would. I mean, we can't do that every day, obviously. So what we're faced with is there an alternative for the dog beach? I would love to get that revenue back. Rather than sending people to Wilmette to give them, I think, $90 per dog, if I'm sorry?
Yeah.
$150 per
Yeah,
dog.
we approached Wilmette last year to see if
And
they
they-
will partner with us and if we, work out a deal, and they did
No,
not.
they don't want to do
wanted,
that.
Yeah, just the out of.
So I'm trying to
resident.
figure out, is there an alternative here? And I understand that you don't want, obviously, you shouldn't have a dog beach where you have a people beach because of potential liability, and we don't allow children, I believe, under 14 to be on the same beach with the dog beach. It's not because of sanitary conditions, it's other things. And so I'm just trying to figure out where we can get that revenue back. What can we do with the people where we have untapped revenue, people who want to take their dogs to exercise? What more can we do for them?
Well, Alderman Fisk, I mean, we're so limited in what our in our current facilities and infrastructure. I mean, you can look at an existing park somewhere and make it a dog park somewhere else in the community. You can give up a swimming beach, which, the council has said they don't want to do that at this time.
I think that's why you probably heard from people tonight talking
Sure.
about Lincoln Street Beach,
Yeah.
because it's not part of the system yet, but
Correct.
It may be. I just don't know what the answer. My reason for asking this to be on the agenda tonight was to ask staff to think about that.
Yeah.
Is there a place on the lakefront where we could have a dog beach? And I think the dog beach, the remnant that's there, may be able to hold 6 dogs or a couple of
A
them,
few, yeah.
but not many of them.
Yeah, and last year, because of the water levels, we did not open it up for operation, but we allowed the community access to the space, and it'd be days where it's a sliver of sand or no sand, but the community still used the space. So we are considering all options at this time. I think we'll be looking once the there's the unresolved issue out there. We'll talk to you, come back to you, and follow the lead of the city manager in terms of what the future would be with the Lincoln Street Beach. But there's no determination of that at this time.
Well, I just want us to be creative on the lakefront to see if there's a place where we can carve out room for these 1,000 people to bring their dogs and give us some more money.
So I'll take you back to 2016, the first year here. There was a sand space that did kind of open up just to the south of the boat dock,
Right.
but it's no longer there.
Right.
And so our options in our existing lakefront infrastructure, I mean, it's limited. I mean, you got your 5 swimming beaches. I'm not aware of, I've even looked at space that was near the water station. There was a sand,
Right.
space of sand, but due to the federal regulations, we can't have access to that space because it's too close to the pumping, the water station.
That's the old Milburn Street Beach.
Yes.
That used to be a public
Yeah,
swimming beach.
but
Right.
it's no longer is, and we couldn't access that. So we've looked, we've walked it. We're trying to come up with something. Once the ice cover melts, if there's an opportunity that presents itself, we absolutely will bring it back to try to make something work. But just under our normal past few years of operation, I'm not confident where that space would be.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me time to talk about this. And Lawrence, when it gets a little warmer, I want to walk the lakefront with you.
I'll be happy
We'll
to.
put on our hiking shoes and walk
Thank
the
you.
lakefront. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further communication? I have something. A thank you to the Children of Family Focused Programming. They sent handwritten notes, I guess a couple dozen of them, of thanks to us for allowing them to enjoy a performance on February 15th at Fleetwood Jourdain Theater, a Black History performance. So thank you to the Children of Family Focus for your handwritten notes. They have all been read. Anything further? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you.